we all set this morning? Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm just going to get kicked off right away and get started rocking and rolling. I know we have kind of set aside about 75 minutes for this. Mostly, and just number one, grateful for you being here. Thank you to Bill for hosting us. Thanks to Bill there. Appreciate you as well. And everybody around the room. And we are just 2 weeks away from the end of the legislative session, and there's plenty that we can talk about. I will allow you to kind of guide the conversation to the topics that you wish to go to. I'll just provide a quick overview from the start. We're grateful to be at the Sable Inn and to have this time. Thanks for getting up early on a Saturday morning. I'm probably more likely to be doing these early morning meetings these days because of my little 9-month-old. Little Theodore gets up at 6:30 every day, so to get rocking and rolling isn't a bad thing. And then you can get up and do the rest of your day. And I know I have a busy one as well. So let's just kind of dive right in here. We've got a very split legislature politically. We've got a 67 Republicans to 67 Democrats in the Minnesota House. In the Senate, we've got 34 Democrats and 33 Republicans. And then we have Governor Walz. And so Minnesota is very evenly divided, which means that anything that passes during this legislative session has to be bipartisan. It has to earn bipartisan support. And we have to find common ground. If for whatever reason one party is trying to get everything that they want, it won't work. Which means that we have and we likely will continue to see some fits and starts and some bumpiness in the road, which in politics you know is pretty normal. So for starters, I'll just provide a little bit of the landscape. Right now, again, about 2 weeks before the end of the legislative session, and the major thing that we have to do is to balance the budget. We have to pass a state budget and balance the budget, and May 19th is that date where we're supposed to be finished with session. Now, the new budget doesn't go into effect until July 1st, and so if for whatever reason we aren't able to get done on time, there's 5 weeks worth of wiggle room to get full agreement. But the goal is to finish by May 19th, and I think there's a lot of pragmatic leaders inside the Capitol who will likely be working very hard to get that done. And then there will be issues that emerge as being the key things that the two parties don't agree upon a lot. So, frame of reference, 2 years ago, the last state budget was around $71 billion, and a little bit of change on top of that. But a lot of that included one-time money, COVID money, call it, from the federal government. At that time, taxes were raised for folks to the tune of about $10 billion. And so as we move forward then, the economic landscape has changed, and the state actually has a budget deficit 2 years from now that is about $6 billion of a budget deficit that the state has to address. And looking at that, this current legislature is looking at passing a state budget that is around $66 billion, plus or minus 66. So no matter what happens, assuming an agreement around those budget targets that we're working on, the state budget will actually shrink or cut by $5 billion. As a conservative, I'm excited about that, but at the same time, this current framework that is currently being negotiated doesn't fully solve the deficit that we have on the horizon 2 years from now. In fact, it is still short another $3 billion 2 years from now. And so essentially we know that we're running a deficit into the future, and whether it's your family or whether it's your business, you know that you need to make changes in order to properly address the expenses that you have coming up, and that's the same with the state. Which is why, I am continuing to push, frankly, to cut more spending from the state side of things, so that we can make life more affordable for people. And a lot of that comes down to mandates, and it doesn't matter whether you're talking about health-related or benefit-related benefits that the county has to administer. It doesn't matter if it's a workplace sort of mandate that impacts school districts or anyone else. Those types of things are the things that are the largest cost drivers for us, and certainly within health and human services, the cost of healthcare and the human services lane. Those are the two largest cost drivers for the state budget that have continued to increase. But I will say that I think that in Minnesota specifically, that arena around human services has been the arena that has been the most ripe for fraud. And in a whole host of different programs. I mean, it's not just one thing. There is an issue with Medicaid fraud. There is a big issue with housing programs. There's a big issue with additional food programs. These things exist in a whole host of, especially, like I said, those benefits that come from the human services lens of our state budget. And the focus of this legislative session that Republicans have championed the entire time, and frankly, we've had some success at getting Democrats on board, has been to really focus on fraud. Because if we're going to have government programs, you don't want those dollars to be stolen by fraudsters and not reaching and supporting the people who need them most. And so there are some really good things that will be done this session to close the loopholes in state law and to essentially demand accountability from these state agencies to stop fraudsters. And so you see that we're going to be closing a numerous number of loopholes. We're going to be protecting whistleblowers. That's been one of the big issues. If you're a whistleblower that has seen an issue with fraud within the Department of Human Services, quite honestly, your job and your family are at risk, because the top end of that agency has just been, frankly, quite corrupt. They have lied to our face. I sit on the Fraud Prevention and State Agency Oversight Committee, and we have the information from whistleblowers that have told members of our committee their stories, and then we will ask the commissioner the questions that would relate to what the whistleblower's concerns are, and they just completely and straight up lie to us. And it has been this air of lack of accountability within the Walz administration for no one to be held accountable, right? On fraud, Minnesota is the top state in the nation, the highest amount of fraud seen anywhere in the nation. $610 million of known fraud over the last 6 years, and especially post-pandemic, is really where a lot of this fraud has occurred. And at the same time, no state employee, no commissioner of any of these state agencies has lost their job. And certainly we have to demand more from our state agencies, because if money is going to be appropriated to support people with disabilities or those seniors, or if it's going to go for food for people who don't have it, that money needs to reach the people who need it, not to be spent and wasted by people who are frankly stealing your money. And so that's one of the biggest, most positive things that will come out of this session will be the work that we do on fraud, both in policy, and then I'm really excited about the fact that we are setting up an Office of Inspector General, which will be, and they've been hammering out the details. It has been a very, very bipartisan effort between the House and the Senate, and Republicans and Democrats on this given topic to create the Office of Inspector General that will have the chance to be outside of other state agencies, but to really dive in and look at not just the practices, but then also holding accountable the people within those agencies to the policies that they need to be covering. So that is going to be incredibly important for us for the future of the state, and I do think that ultimately will get done. It will be housed within the executive branch, and the governor will ultimately have the chance to appoint that person, but that person will have to be confirmed by a 2/3 vote of the Senate, meaning almost 100% that it would have to earn bipartisan support. And my understanding is the governor would essentially need to appoint from a list of nominations that the Legislative Audit Commission would present to the governor. So in essence, there is a check on Walz in this circumstance, but any future governor, by the way that we would set up this Office of Inspector General, which I think that, again, that's going to be the most positive thing that comes out of this session, so that we can get after the fraud, because we know of $610 million. But I'm not sure how much you all watch the news, if you watch KARE 11, if you watch Fox 9, frankly, these investigative reporters are seeing more and more and more fraud. There was a story from just 2 nights ago that KARE 11 did, and there's been a housing program set up. where a given nonprofit will have a purpose and a mission of helping especially low-income folks get and obtain housing. Well, and this is happening. This is happening kind of across the board, which is driving the huge costs to our state budget. That in this one circumstance, there was a woman, she was lower income, but she was looking for housing. She found a place that she wanted to rent. She was working with this nonprofit to help get everything facilitated to get into this new place. And then she just needed a few other things. She needed a vacuum. She needed a few other things. And if I'm remembering correctly from this story, it was like a housing program that was tangential to Medicaid. The nonprofit was charging and billing for Medicaid while never giving the total, and never giving any service, any actual service to the woman who was trying to get into her housing. And they ended up charging, in this instance, it was over $2,000 over a couple months that came right from the program, but the woman never received anything but a vacuum. Like, it was a complete waste. And that was just one story. That was a story from just 2 nights ago on the news. But this sort of thing is happening very frequently on programs that are within the realm of human services. So with that, this is your meeting. There's plenty of concerns that I'm sure you all have. My goal is to make Minnesota more affordable. That means that we need to help remove as many mandates as possible from the state level onto folks here locally in Benton County. And I'll just say that so often what I see in St. Paul is a desire from my friends on the other side of the aisle that live in Minneapolis and St. Paul to try and tell us how to live our lives, making our lives more expensive. Quite honestly, like, that's the result. They have ideas for the ways that their schools should run, their cities should run, their communities should run, their businesses should run. And instead of just saying, hey, why don't we just do Earn, Sick, and Save time in St. Paul, they just choose to make it a mandate across the whole state. And that's not something that's helpful to any of us here. And so that's just the air of the issues that we're dealing with. But I want to just open the floor to all of you. I'm here to listen and be accountable. I'm your representative in St. Paul, and so I want to make sure that I'm representing your voice well here over the last couple of weeks. So just feel free to raise your hand, and when you raise your hand, say your first and last name, and then the city or the township that you live in. Mr. Stark.
What department would that inspector general be? How many people do you think they'd have to hire?
That's a good question. I don't have the exact number, but it could probably it could be up to 200 people that they have to hire for that. We'll see exactly how many. I don't have that number yet. That has not formalized at this point. The details are still yet to come on that. So, as an example, the Feeding Our Future case, which is the largest COVID-era fraud that happened anywhere, and it was here in Minnesota, $250 million. When that group came into Minnesota to not just investigate, but do the raids and all that into Feeding Our Future, I mean, they had 200 agents on site in Minnesota to do that. So, pretty wild.
So government just keeps getting bigger.
Currently, yes. And that's one of the most unfortunate things. So you want to take a look at the last 2 years. So state government has become the #1 employer in Minnesota. And over the last 2 years, the cost, not just the cost, but the total number of new employees in the state of Minnesota has increased by 6,000 new state employees is what was passed by the previous legislature. It's time to curtail that. And then I'm going to tell you the next dirty little secret. A state employee, an average full-time state employee, between salary and benefits, costs the state approximately $125,000 per year. So when you add 6,000 new state employees, and you put that on every year into the future, that cost for 6,000 new state employees is $750 million.
Ouch.
Per year.
You have an application?
Well, there are state agencies that have offices in St. Cloud. I was sitting around the campfire with one of my friends who's a teacher last night, and we were talking about just the challenges that exist in getting the right people into teaching and being good teachers, and how you can draw comparisons between other jobs, and sometimes teachers, comparatively towards other professional careers, don't have the same earning potential, right? And then when I shared that part about what the average is for a state employee, I mean, she was just like, I need to go get a new job. I need to, and so that is one of the, and that's where things are at today. Some of the private sector are able to make more. We know that the business model around farming isn't that where you have that level of money. In fact, it's just about, what entirely different set of circumstances when you're a farmer, right? So, anyways, that's the landscape on that. Yes?
Glenda Ridley, Morrow Township. I'm a guardian, conservator, court visitor. Did you either watch video or read the OLA report on guardianship? And then I'm wondering about your knowledge and opinion on the recent task force that they created, and then how now have disbanded. Do you have any knowledge or?
I don't, but I'd be happy to read up on it.
Okay.
And feel free to share with the group here if there's anything in particular that you think that I should know or that everyone else should know.
A guardian is somebody. I deal with vulnerable adults, so the Medicare type information is very important, because my people that are either developmentally delayed or maybe an older person in a dementia care facility, I'm their decision maker. So guardianship is a lot of times done by family members. I was kind of shocked by the number in the OLA report that said 90% are family. I'm a professional guardian, and since 2013, and I've seen more cases looking for good professional guardians, because we've got the bad guardians and all that, and that's how I got into it. I'm retired law enforcement, so I was investigating a bad guardian, and I said, this is not okay. Guardians are not licensed or certified or anything like that. So it's been a super hot topic, because people thought that guardians were free to do anything and there'd be no consequences, which isn't true. A lot of the cases I got were because individuals were being charged for financial exploitation. And so then they look outside the family to get a professional guardian. I know of professional guardians that have warrants for their arrest or are facing criminal, or they get removed as a guardian. So there were consequences, in my opinion. So there was a law that was recently created last year that made it easier to sue a guardian, which is why me as an individual, I don't want to lose everything I have, because I'm out there providing a service to vulnerable individuals, and the family don't like something, they have the right to sue me. And so that was a fiasco. What got created out of that was a task force. The task force, in my opinion, was an absolute joke. When I watched them the first meeting, my mom is a power of attorney for my uncle, so that has nothing to do with it. Everybody on that task force, there was maybe a couple that knew about guardianship, and the choices they made for those people that are on there did not have the experience to do that. And then all of a sudden, and so that was the big push. Before we do any more legislation, we needed to know what the problem was. And so that's why this task force was deemed to figure out what the problem was. Well, I didn't realize at the same time, OLA, they reached out to me as a court visitor, and I did their survey. They did a very good report. It was very interesting, because the judicial branch then did a rebuttal basically to that. So that was very interesting, because there is nobody babysitting guardians. There isn't. Conservators, that money, they watch that. For guardians, it's up to the, somebody that cares about the person or the person to make a complaint about that guardian. So I know the system is flawed and it needs help. I'm also on MAGIC, Minnesota Association of Guardian and Conservators. It's basically our only resource. And as you mentioned, outstate Minnesota and the metro area, a lot of the people on that board are attorneys from the metro area, so I was ecstatic when they asked me to join their board so I can be the voice of outstate. And so we're trying to reach out outstate-wise to get that. But it concerns me with legislation, especially with vulnerable adults. And I know how much money gets paid out for these individuals in their group homes, in their facilities, in their, case management and all that kind of stuff. But literally, they only get $125 personal needs money to live off of. And so it does frustrate me when I know there's families out there that are raking in the dough, oh, have another kid, do that kind of stuff when there's vulnerable adults that, barely can, they can't even go on vacation or do anything because they don't have money. So I'm concerned about, and human services, obviously. We just did a rebranding with Magic, and when she showed us the thing, we're like, that looks like DHS logo. We gotta get rid of those colors. We don't want to be associated with that. So I'm just, if there's any information about guardianship you need and that thing, and
maybe I can get your contact information before we head out today. I'd love to follow up and get more information. One of the good things about our fraud prevention committee is we're going to continue to meet once the session is over. We're going to continue to meet likely at least on a monthly basis. We might even travel around the state to hear the concerns from people locally. It happens in every community. It's not tied to one, right? St. Cloud has been a big issue over some of the fraud that we've seen, and we want to fix the problem, right? And we will have next year to work on additional policy things. It's a bummer to hear that you're getting it here. You have additional liability to be concerned with as you're trying to provide the service that you are. But we also need to just have strong program integrity standards, which is what we're trying to get at.
So there's licensing or certification that is on the horizon, which is good. But again, when you don't get paid very much, and if I have to pay for an annual license plus all the training and stuff like that, it gets to be expensive. And you can't find people to serve as a guardian either. So, So
very good.
I'll line you up.
Awesome. Yes,
Thanks for coming this morning, appreciate it. I have two questions, but I wanted to make a comment first to bring into context human services. So just as a point of discussion, Benton County's got about a $17 million human services budget. That equates to about 110 employees in Benton County. There's 65 mandated human services programs in this county. And we have about 25% of our population is on medical assistance in some way, shape, or form. So there's about 10,000 people in this county that are on MA. Anyways, to that, my question is, what's the legislative viewpoint on Governor Walz's attempt to cost shift to counties' human service dollars? The last number I heard was about $400 million. Obviously, the only way we're going to be able to pay for that is to raise property taxes. So, where does that sit today from discussions down there? And then secondly, bonding. Where do you see the bonding going?
To get to that point, so the human services realm, like you said, that's the #1 cost driver at the state level. So I think #1, the best thing that we could do would be to cut the mandates that's coming from St. Paul. But at the same time, there's people who are in a vulnerable situation, right? When taking a look at the governor's budget, across the board, the entirety of his budget did push a lot of those costs onto counties. Not just counties, school districts, and others, right? Like local municipalities across the board, we're going to see more of these costs sent to them. I believe that the negotiation between the House and Senate will be more favorable to the counties, and know that there's plenty of former local elected county commissioners and others who share those same concerns, both within our caucus and amidst others. In every caucus, I think there's former county commissioners who, thinking about county property taxpayers is their #1 thing. And so I'm not going to tell you that it's going to be perfect. I think that there probably will be additional costs that are sent to local units of government. But I think it's yet to be known exactly what that's going to look like. I don't have the specifics right in front of me. Maybe you and I can follow up and do a phone call or something early next week to see what the House budget does. We'll be taking up the Human Services bill on Tuesday in the House. That does cut state spending like human services. I want to say it's by about $2 billion. So it's quite significant. But some of those costs are definitely going to be pushed down to local units of government. The thing that I will say about that is this. So, when we think about human services, and this actually applies to almost every area of government, on human services, if we choose to have that paid at the state level, that means that we here in Foley, or Rice, or Morrill, will be sharing the cost for Minneapolis and St. Paul. And the costs might, I'm not saying perfectly, but might be a higher share of the cost that we would be taking if the state pays for it, rather than if the cost was only for those which we serve in Benton County. It's not a perfect answer, I'm not trying to make it sound easy, but that's one of the, right? If you're a Minneapolis or St. Paul legislator, you may want to say, hey, I want to cost share my human services with Benton County, so then I have less to pay if I'm a Hennepin County taxpayer or a Ramsey County taxpayer, versus if it's at the county level, then it's your share of those costs. And so that's like an overarching thing that I think that we all should try to understand as citizens, is that if you are carrying those costs from the statewide level, it's likely going to be a higher cost than what we have on a local level.
Well, and what's unfortunate for Benton County is we're in a unique situation where obviously we go to the river, right? So we have all of East St. Cloud, and 80% of our human services are in East St. Cloud.
Sure.
And Stearns kind of has that same issue. Everything's going to be on their eastern side.
Yeah.
So the mandate cutting would be significant. So I get your point.
And then the fraud piece, like I want to be very specific about the fraud piece. Like we have seen the stories out of St. Cloud. On these programs, like we have identified $610 million of known fraud. At this point, with what we've learned and what the investigative journalists are doing right now, we think there's a possibility that there's $3 billion worth of fraud happening. Like there's a possibility of that, and specifically over the realm of human services, housing programs, disability services, where, and it's so sad that it's happening here in Minnesota, but if we just intentionally spend more time across all units of government focusing on that and getting this right, our state can benefit for the long term. And if the people who actually need it are getting the care, I think that's the most important part, rather than us all carrying additional cost. That's where I come from.
How about bonding?
Yep, bonding. So, the largest bonding in the history of the state was passed 2 years ago, approximately $2.7 billion. That, in conjunction with the fact that there is a $6 billion budget deficit on the horizon, there's not a great ability for the state to continue to borrow. The numbers have ranged at the Capitol from, is it 1.2 billion to basically 700 million is in consideration at the moment. Bonding is one of those things at the legislature that is the last thing to happen to help bring legislators together. It certainly could happen. For frame of reference for those in the room, my friends from Gilman. Gilman is my top priority to get your $1.8 million for wastewater. And the good news is that you've got the local money, you've got the federal money, and so that actually raises the fact that you've got other dollars from other government entities raises its level of likelihood to be included. I can't tell you today that there's going to be a bonding bill. Like I don't know.
One last question, can you verify that I read Representative Wilmot has brought our CASA 1 Maybe Lake project to the top of his list?
I don't know if it's at the top of his list.
Okay.
But that'd be great if it
I thought I
was.
read that the other day.
Good.
So that would make.
Yeah, everybody's on board. Yeah, that's good. It did that. Casal One did receive a hearing in the bonding committee a week ago. Mr. Berg was down there this last week, certainly that one has a chance too. But just for everybody's frame of reference, Gilman's my number one priority.
Figures. Good for you guys.
Yes, sir.
Kevin Starr, Utah Township. Could you explain what's happening with your bill about the illegals getting free health care?
Yep.
And another thing, you're questioning about Keith Allison feeding the hungry frog, or whatever that was. How did that go, and is something going to happen to him over that?
Yeah.
Could you explain what's going on there?
Those are the two hot buttons of the day. Okay, so the providing Minnesota care for people who do not have legal status in our state started on January 1st of this year. And when Democrats passed this 2 years ago, they expected that there were only going to be approximately 7,700 people across the entire state who were going to be getting Minnesota care, which is it's for a lower income tier. It's actually one up, so it's like 200% of the poverty line. And that particular, so 7,700 people were expected to be enrolled in it. And the cost is a monthly premium that the state covers, which is about $590 per month, which equates to $7,091 per year for people who are here illegally. And that cost 2 years ago, they expected was going to be $198 million over 4 years. Then, when it started and people started enrolling for it on January 1st, it immediately jumped above the projection. And over the first 3 months of the year, there were over 17,000 people who had signed up for it. We don't even have an accurate read or picture over how many people are in Minnesota illegally. The most recent actual number was from 2019, and that was 82,000 people were here illegally. And that was before Joe Biden was president. Before 10 million people came across the southern border. And of course, not all those people came to Minnesota, but you would expect that we would have taken on probably a couple additional tens of thousands of people who are here illegally just in the last 4 years. And so I anticipate that there's well over 100,000 people who are here in the state illegally, and every single month more people are signing up for it. So the most recent number, the 17,000, is from April 1st. And so we are making this one of our top priorities to stop giving this free health care for people who are here illegally. And then ultimately, those dollars we want to be sent to help for the people who have legal status, and whether they're seniors or whether those with disabilities. Like, the realm around human services is so expensive that money is needed to cover that gap and hole. So for frame of reference, that's what that is. It is probably going to be the single number one topic that you see talked about these next couple weeks. Republicans, we're going to make this is going to be our hill to die on. Like, we are going to make this the top priority. So I'm blessed to be the chief author of that bill, and to be the one who's the tip of the spear fighting on that issue. It's incredible how costly that is to the state, and even worse, because think about it. How many Minnesotans are receiving that level, $7,000 per person, from the state? And it's just so shocking to me. So then to your second question, so the Attorney General came in front of the Fraud Prevention Committee on Monday of this last week. We requested him to be there, and frankly, from a Republican perspective, we weren't really expecting him to show up when we sent the original invite. We're just like, is he just not gonna, right? Is he going to just say, this is hyper-partisan, I'm not gonna show? Well, he showed. He's actually a former member of the Minnesota House. So he came, And then, I'm not sure, how many of you have either listened to or read about the audio recording? It's about a 50-minute audio recording that he was in a meeting, doing a meeting with a number of people who have been convicted in the Feeding Our Future fraud scandal. Is familiar with this? So he did a 50-minute meeting with them. In the meeting, in the audio recording, you can hear him say that he's, quote, in a fight with the state agencies to stop the piddly crap that state agencies were trying to hold the program integrity to the highest levels, and the Attorney General was putting his thumb on the scale to say, Department of Human Services, or Department of Education in this case, back off and stop. Like, that is the frame in which that conversation appears. And so one of our goals in that meeting, in our fraud meeting that happened on Monday, was to, frankly, allow the Attorney General to just provide additional context for us. My question to him in that meeting was just, can you tell us more about this? Which is more like, here, let me open the noose and let you say, what in the world were you doing, like, in that meeting? And he has contradicted himself multiple times, okay? So he stated, first so shortly after the FBI raided Feeding Our Future in January of 2022, the Attorney General sent out a press release saying that his agency, the Attorney General's office, had been working in partnership with federal entities on the Feeding Our Future case for over a year. And there's no evidence of that. And then he, in that recording, which happened 1 month earlier in December of 2021, was stating that he was essentially advocating on behalf of the fraudsters instead of defending the state agency, which it is his constitutional duty to defend. And so that's a huge part of this ongoing deal. Then later, he has now put out an op-ed in the Star Tribune trying to say what he was doing in all this. And his words in committee, his press release from February or January of 2022, and his op-ed are all three different pieces of information that do not connect. So I anticipate that there's going to be more to come on this. The fraud, like the House Fraud Committee is only one entity in this, right? Ultimately, the dollars that were provided to Feeding Our Future were dollars that came from the federal government. So I anticipate that any greater action on this topic will actually come from the U.S. Attorney's Office and Pam Bondi to further investigate Keith Ellison and all of the implications surrounding this. And there's a possibility that all of this is all intertwined together and may also implicate Ilhan Omar. So, and Ilhan Omar and Keith Ellison are pretty close, so.
Should we throw a lot more F-bombs around
So, any further questions on that?
Well, when's your bill coming up, or you're the author of that bill?
Yep. So for frame of reference for you, so that would be a cut. To insert my bill, it is currently being negotiated, has been negotiated for almost the last month. So the House Democrat chair and the House Republican chair have been trying to find agreement on the health budget for a month, and the Democrats have been completely unwilling. Like, they have rejected every offer that Republicans have made for that budget, which has always included the cut to illegal immigrants getting health care. So when I say it's our hill to die on, like, we've been fighting the battle for a month, and just anticipate for the next 2 weeks especially, that is just going to continue to rise. You're going to see it in the news more and more and more. And ultimately, I just don't think that we can get a budget if we're going to be providing $600 million to people who are here illegally.
So I have a question.
Yep.
Wally owns Mayhew Lake Township, so isn't this list I'll call it a list of illegal immigrants that are going to be accepting health care from the state, which is much better than most of us have. Isn't that a direct list that could go right to ICE and say, here's your list of illegal immigrants here, boom, take care of it.
You know, we have two things. We have very strong data privacy laws in Minnesota, and so it's not quite as simple as you think. Secondarily to that, you know, the Trump administration's perspective has been to take violent criminals first, right? So one of the other priorities that House Republicans have championed this session has been a bill and an amendment that was basically the Lake and Riley Act that you read about on the federal level that passed Congress and had Democrat votes and signed into law. We brought that same amendment forward in Minnesota to essentially say that if a local law enforcement agency, whether it's a county sheriff or a police department, if they are aware of a violent criminal who they suspect to be an illegal immigrant, that they share that data with federal law enforcement entities, with ICE. And that, you would have expected, would have earned some Democrat votes, but a week ago yesterday, that was brought up and every Democrat voted against it. But that would have been the key to help make that happen.
Right.
Secondarily to that, 2 years ago, they passed driver's licenses for all, right? And so people who don't have legal status in our country have been able to get driver's licenses. You would think that that same data for that would also be able to be shared, but they wrote into law that that couldn't be shared in that way. So, but at the same time, they have to be able to share that information with the Secretary of State's office for voter registration, which there was an issue with that last fall, but we got that ironed out. You have a question?
Sure. Ryan Olson, Foley, Minnesota. I had a question about a recent bill. It looked like your name was on it. Didn't look like a serious bill. It was just H.R. 3219. Looked like you're trying to ban RNA vaccinations and injections. So would this bill make it so people won't have a choice to get a vaccine, and would it affect cancer treatments because mRNA is supposed to be like an upcoming treatment for that?
Okay. Yeah. So mRNA vaccinations were one of those that was definitely pushed on Minnesotans and Americans during the time of the pandemic. And I can say from the time that I spent at people's doors across our community, especially in 2022, there were people who had never been involved politically before, who got involved because at their employer, they were being forced to get a vaccination. And a vaccination that fit into the lens of this mRNA.
Banning it so we wouldn't have a choice to get it?
So on that particular topic, like, I believe in medical freedom. And in this circumstance, there is state law already that talks about essentially biochemical weapons and weapons of mass destruction.
Yeah.
This bill is not going to pass. This session is not going to pass.
I just saw your name on it. That's why I was hoping you could answer my question.
And in part, it's to start a conversation about what did happen. This bill in its current form would not pass the legislature, and it would have to be heavily amended. This is something that, and again, it wasn't me who wrote the bill.
You were just
I was a co-author of the bill. Yes.
So it would ban the choice of it, and would it also affect cancer treatments too, right?
In its current form, it likely would, and so that's something that would have to be addressed.
As you know, I've been doing chemo for 6 months, which is awful. I'd really like to have these other options that they're working on.
Sure. Yep. Like I said, I think that would have to be something that's addressed if the bill were to move forward.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Sarah Molzop, Foley. So with the vaccine, I emailed you about the mandate on the the MMR one. Why is it specific to that vaccine? And then there's another bill trying to go through with homeschool laws, like who can homeschool? And I mean, a lot of it makes sense, like, and I do believe we all have common sense, whether we use it or not. But I also believe in people having the ability to redeem themselves, and if they were convicted of that, like, this bill sounds like you're never ever able to homeschool your child, ever, if you were convicted of that. And I just find it really weird that I homeschooled for a couple of years, and when I got into that community, I mean, there's so many laws already regarding the homeschool community, but it seems like Minnesota's pushing harder and harder and harder to make it, like, basically impossible to homeschool. And why is that? Like, what's going on that they're so concerned about the homeschool community? And two, when I was in the homeschool community, most of the people doing the homeschooling are very educated, and not just, I mean, I was also ignorant with the homeschool community until I got in it, and it's nothing like people think it is, and it just, I find it odd that the state is like kind of, they're making it just seem like a whole bunch of weirdos are homeschooling, and oh, we need to take that away and put them in the public school because they're better off that way. And then with the vaccine mandate, like, if that were to pass, it would open up a can of worms that, oh, okay, now we got this one. I mean, the schedule of vaccinations for the public school child is ridiculous. And right now, Minnesota does have a conscience exemption. Why are they trying to take that away? And, like, people just assume because you don't want to vaccinate against one, so I don't do the chickenpox shot for my children. All the other ones I got, minus the COVID vaccine, but I have to go to the county and I have to get it notarized that, nope, I'm an anti-vaxxer because I don't do the chickenpox shot. So now on record, if anyone had to go dig into me, I'm an anti-vaxxer because I didn't do one of the, I don't even know, it's like 12, but it's like multiple doses. And I just don't understand why they're pushing so hard to take that away. And do you feel like if that were to pass, it would make it so, you know, my child would have to get the chickenpox vaccine and the whole entire schedule? Like, do you think that would happen?
Yeah.
And you say...
This is one of the battles of our time. So Sarah, number one, thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing that perspective, because your perspective is shared throughout our entire district. Like, I hear it from one end to the other. Like, parents have gotten involved politically because of this issue, right? And so, for frame of reference for you, like, let's just take this out 30,000 foot level. Governor Walz went on a nationwide tour to run to be vice president. He came back and said, man, I hate those people who live in rocks and cows type of country. And I want to negotiate from a perspective of, I know what they value, so I'm going to take that away. And I'm going to force that conversation to be the conversation in Minnesota. So that Isaac has to fight to maintain medical freedom in Minnesota. Meanwhile, then I'll be able to get what I want that's over here, right? And so that's what, like, Democrat negotiating is like, right? In part, it kind of goes back to this whole thing. Like, if on the political left, they're going to try and take away conscientious exemptions, I'm on this bill that's like the complete opposite, right? Which is just like, no, like, we shouldn't have these sorts of things ever forced on people. Like, I believe in parental rights, I believe in medical freedom, and at the end of the day here, like, this idea of forcing vaccinations or keeping databases of this, or like, it's a really dangerous path to go down. And there's a reason that people maintain these rights. And so I think that fortunately, kind of on both ends of this spectrum, right? You've got the bill that I'm on over here. You've got what the Democrats are doing over here. We'll be able to get to the middle, right? And to stop that that attempt to take away the conscientious exemption. And then in addition, on the homeschooling piece, public schools in Minnesota, and this doesn't speak specifically for the ones in our own community, but public schools in Minnesota have seen terrible declining graduation rates across the state. We have gone from being a beacon of one of the best states for education to today, less than 50% of kids are graduating statewide. And that's a problem. And I'm not, like, I know that some of the school districts in the community that I represent have some of the highest test scores comparison to the state, and, like, do incredible work. But man, this system is broken. It is so broken. And there's a big part of me that thinks that it's only going to get worse until we rip the Band-Aid off on this. And it's honest to goodness difficult for me to vote for more money for this broken education system. And what the political left is trying to do to homeschoolers and those in private schools, private Christian schools, to get to this other point. Like the governor, in his budget proposal, takes away funding to non-public schools, non-public school aid. And then you've got this bill that's trying to add additional reporting requirements and essentially put a lot more state and county influence into a homeschool family. These things, it's just a battle over the future for our kids. And we want excellence in education, but frankly, it should be equal, and dollars should flow to support the kids where they are. School districts in our community don't receive the same level of per pupil aid that they do in the metro communities. That impacts each one of our schools too. So, fortunately, because Republicans have a seat at the table, because we're at 67 in the House, both that issue regarding the conscientious exemption and the homeschool issue, those are dead on arrival in the House. They won't move forward. But it's
Can you 100% guarantee that? Because I also didn't think abortion rights would get to the point where they were either.
I can. I mean, I've had these conversations in our caucus. Like, we're not going to vote for anything that takes away the rights of homeschool families. One of my great friends and mentors is Representative Ron Krisha out of Little Falls. He's the chair of the Education Finance Committee in the House on the Republican side. And I mean, he's going to fight this battle and not allow those things to move forward. So, and in particular, the conscientious exemption piece, that's not in one of these budget bills. So that was introduced, right? That was introduced by far left legislators. But then the non-public aid cut, that's also going to be one of the things that we absolutely, will fight for. And in the House budget, by the way, this is one of the very interesting parts. So the House education budget is calendared to be up on the floor of the House on Monday. And the budget for schools would provide an additional $40 million for K-12 education in the state. And in it, it's a really good bill. In that, it removes one of the really onerous mandates for local school districts in the form of unemployment insurance for hourly school workers that was just passed 2 years ago. And that it sunsets that in 2028. In addition, with the additional money that's flowing to education, it provides a lot more flexibility to the school districts to spend it in the way that they want to, rather than telling them from St. Paul how it needs to be spent. However, while that was negotiated between Republicans and Democrats in the House, and it passed out of the Education Committee, and it passed out of the Ways and Means Committee, it came to the Rules Committee, and then I sit on the Rules Committee. And the Democrats showed up earlier this week, I think it was on Wednesday, or Tuesday or Wednesday, and they wanted to completely undo the signed agreement and say that they weren't going to remove that mandate in the future. They wouldn't do it. But in that same bill, we protect the non-public school aid. And we're going to hold their feet to the fire and ensure that they pass that agreement, because otherwise the rest of the agreement is going to be all undone.
Okay.
So hopefully that answers your question.
It does, but on the non-public school aid, so my kids also attended St. John's, and then they were students when the public school cut ties with it, and now the state is just like, hey, we're going to take all your money away. Don't you think that's kind of foolish, considering like schools like St. John's is only up until 6th grade, and most likely the majority of those students will then go into the public school. So wouldn't the state want to help fund and make those children better so that way they can continue? Because ultimately, if you just take their money away, they're going to be farther behind because the school's not going to have the resources. And then good luck to the burnt out teachers who now need to catch those students up. Like, it seems like it's
Yeah.
so
Again,
silly that.
This was just one of those cases where the governor said, these are my political opponents, I'm not going to
Yeah.
fund them, and I'm going to force you as Republicans to fight for them. And that's what's happening, right?
Yeah.
But our House budget will take care of them. So.
Can I ask to clarify on that? I send my kids to St. John's area school here. So you don't think that the governor's part of
Cuts
his
to
budget?
non-public aid.
Yeah, you don't think that'll go through?
No, we'll get that taken care of.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Nick Mullen, London Report.
Awesome. Perfect, yeah.
Hi, Sharon Kipcott, Gilmanton Township, school board citizen. Does that also take care of the busing for those children? I heard that they were thinking about not,
For the non-public schools?
right,
Yeah, that is the aid that provides for the busing service. Sometimes it's educational materials and others that are included in that non-public school aid that is provided. The House budget protects that.
and I'll just state that I just think both our state and our school district were starved for leadership and accountability. This where there's been this large amount of money missing. I don't see Mr. Ellison taking any ownership. He was at the top of the ladder and absolutely just refused and counterdicted. And how could you get a position like that or be in a position like that and not know? I mean, you just almost have to be asleep.
Yeah. Well, so to just provide additional context to you, like this is in part of his own community, right? So those folks that were implicated, like he had relationships with many of the people who were implicated in the Feeding Our Future scandal. As an example, he had taken, and up until Monday, he had not returned. He had received large campaign contributions from multiple people who were charged in the Feeding Our Future case. And his son, so in this meeting, his son is also heavily implicated. He's a Minneapolis City Councilor, Jeremiah Ellison.
Okay, does he have a sister too that sits on?
Maybe. No, not on the City Council.
Okay, it's his son, okay.
It's his son that's on the City Council. So it's all very interconnected. And it's not just those two. So it runs deep within Democratic politics in Minnesota, specifically in Minneapolis, but also in St. Paul too. So, and the real question here is how many Democrat politicians are going to be implicated in this? How many people were standing up for Keith Ellison in this? How much influence was the Attorney General trying to wield with the executive branch? How much did Governor Walz know before they were formally raided by the FBI? And did Governor Walz or did Keith Ellison tell a state agency not to maintain the program integrity standards that were in law at the time? Did that happen? Yes or no? And we don't fully know that yet. I think that's where we're getting to. Because in that audio recording, the Attorney General said that he had multiple conversations with the governor about these things.
But Isaac, we constantly see where there's so much information that implicates somebody. I mean, it just happens again and again. And who's lost their job to date?
To date, nobody. Currently in Minnesota, right, Republicans don't have the ability to, fire a state agency staff person. The only thing that could happen, right? I could bring an impeachment article versus Keith Ellison. In order for that to pass the House, it has to have a majority of the vote, right? We're at 67-67. I'm not expecting a Democrat to vote for that, right? But at the same time, because this was federal money, Pam Bondi can pursue this, and I know, one, they're still investigating. They are still, on a regular basis, going after new people involved in the Feeding Our Future scandal, right? They're adding more people all the time, and I think that there's a good possibility that Keith Ellison likely at some point will be implicated. And obviously that would be a massive story, but it should happen at that level. And it's just my job at this point to help get more of the information out there, right? Like, help set the traps.
Who gets that to Bonnie then? Who gets that information passed forward?
Well, it's, number one, I think that there's actually a lot of people that are following this right now, right? And so there's numerous news stories, right? we have already written Pam Bundy about the fraud in Minnesota from our committee, and we'll continue to.
Thank you.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, I want as much, I want to have accountability in this as quickly as possible, and to, at the end of the day, it's about stopping the fraud for the future. I can't change the $610 million from the past, but I want to do everything in state law and to put the accountability measures in place so that it doesn't happen in the future. Yeah.
Can you explain what Ellison is actually suing the Trump administration over coming up?
He's suing the Trump administration over about 15 different things. Like everything from illegal immigrants to transgender rights to the boys and girls sports to withholding funding from the federal government to the state. Like he has either filed himself or joined over a dozen different lawsuits against the Trump administration. So, and at that point, is there any greater waste than to see one entity of government and taxpayer dollars suing another entity of government and taxpayers? Like,
Do you guys have a cost estimate on how much those lawsuits are gonna cost the taxpayer?
it really depends. It depends upon a few things. So if he brought it himself, then Minnesota would obviously be the one carrying all the costs. A lot of times what he's doing is he's joining other attorneys general across the country. And so then I'm just gonna use round numbers, but if the cost for the lawsuit was $1 million and then Minnesota carries 1/16 of that cost, and then it's over each of those. So it's hard to estimate at this point, and it depends upon how long.
But it's our money.
Yep, it's our money that comes from his agency. So he gets a certain allotment for his attorney general's office, and then he uses that money to do this. So
The pigs are squealing.
yeah, so it's people within his office. So, additional questions?
Light rail transit, is that in the budget this year?
We did some great work on this. So light rail and trains in general in Minnesota has been, as many of you know, very, very costly to the state. Almost every project in recent years that has been proposed and that they named a number on it earlier, the cost has just exploded, many times more than double what the original cost estimate has been. And as you know, they're still working. They have not finished the Southwest Light Rail project that goes from Minneapolis to Eden Prairie. And then there's a whole host of there's the Blue Line, there's the North Star Rail, there's the Northern Lights Express to Duluth. So our transportation budget in the House, which passed earlier this week, does a lot to curtail that, which is fantastic. Number one, I think the bill stops future funding for the Northern Lights Express to Duluth. It also either slows or stops the funding for the North Star line. And then the third piece is, I think it has a study on what is the Blue Line, which is the line that would run from Minneapolis towards Maple Grove. We like Crystal in that. So there's a number of very positive things inside that transportation bill, and that was another bill where our House Republican negotiator did a tremendous job, and it caused a lot of frustration in the Democratic caucus. So we did a really, really good job on that bill. In addition, that transportation bill also limited or curtailed the greenhouse gas emissions standard, which the Democrats had pushed forward, and if I'm remembering correctly, it eliminates it, and that's a huge win, and that's one of the reasons that the Democrats were very up in arms about that budget bill. So what I'm trying to share is like our House Republican negotiators have had some big successes. Like we haven't won everything, we're not going to win everything, but there are going to be there's going to be tangible wins that we will be able to deliver to the taxpayers of Minnesota at the end of this budget deal. Any other questions? Yes, Andy.
Couple Gilman things. I'll keep it short for everyone else, but one thing that we've noticed over the last number of years is extreme rising costs in our required financial audit that we have to do every year. So we have to do a financial audit for two reasons. One, we have a joint clerk treasurer position.
Yeah.
Number one, because we're a town of 200 people, and finding people with the skill set and willingness to do that within our community is challenging. So we've hired it from the outside. But that really doesn't factor in because there's also a requirement from the state that if you have revenue over $276,000, you have to have a financial audit every year. And because we operate a municipal liquor store, we exceed that.
Sure.
My comment is more about that number hasn't changed, but our audit cost goes up by 10% year after year with inflation and everything else. So, you know, with that $276,000 mandate requirement, our financial audit is $25,000, $30,000 every year. We went out for RFP last year to see, you know, is there a better option? We can't get any accounting firms to respond to RFP because we're a small town in Gilman. Nobody has any interest in us. So my comment to you is more of, I doubt that's being discussed at you know, the state level.
It is being discussed.
Okay.
Yeah. In fact, we voted on a bill that gets to this topic. We voted on a bill on this on Thursday this week. I can follow up with you on the particulars, but it does make some tweaks and changes. From my lens, as I read it, it helps small cities in this specific area. So let me follow up with you on particulars. I can't recite them offhand.
Yeah.
It was in a much larger bill that will likely pass this session, and the way that I read it, it would be positive for small cities.
Okay. Yeah, because right now it's, you know, we're being forced to do it. It comes back squeaky clean. You know, they come out and present it to us. It's the same stuff every year. I'm not saying there shouldn't be some sort of oversight or, you know, audit requirement, but when a city of our size is, you know, spending $30,000 a year on it, it becomes a burden to our taxpayers.
I get it, 100%.
And then kind of along that same line, you know, speaking of our infrastructure project, you know, somebody brought up to me, you know, the prevailing wage requirements and Davis-Bacon requirements and how those impact the costs of doing a construction project in rural Minnesota and small communities. And, you know, obviously nothing's going to change for that with our project, but, you know, kind of going down in the future, is that something that maybe needs a look, you know, as far as not necessarily fraud, but just abuse in you know, the amount of money that small communities and rural communities are having to pay for work to be done that, you know, is maybe twice the cost of what people would be willing to do the work for because of those laws. And I'm not an expert on the topic at all, but somebody asked me to kind of pass that along.
Okay, interesting. Prevailing wage is a very interesting topic statewide. For a frame of reference for you, our state is seen as a very labor-friendly state. We also, in our own community, are one of the most like labor union, trade union communities in the entire state. And it's because those people who work in construction and work in building roads and bridges and large infrastructure, what do they like? They like having a plot of 20 or 40 or 80 acres that they can live on, have a small hobby farm, and sure, they go and work in the cities, but like they were all raised with the same work ethic that we have in this room, and this whole like an honest day's work, and they like the values that we have here. So my point in saying that is, on prevailing wage statewide, it's something that is like, that would be monumental to change the general trajectory that we're on that topic. So I don't see it as likely, even in the long term. I really don't. could there be tweaks around the edges that maybe a bipartisan group of legislators could work on? Yes, I think that if I was made aware of, and I'm still learning more about some of the specifics over, how do they measure what the prevailing wage is in a community, right? Are we measuring the 5 counties around us, or are we being compared to Marshall or Minneapolis or Ely? But largely, what I will also add is one of the things that's important is one of the benefits of a prevailing wage standard is that it allows for you to have more local labor from the people who live in your community versus oftentimes when there aren't the sorts of standards that we have in Minnesota, contractors come in from other states where the dollars that you spend that are public dollars don't get respent in your same community. So that's one of the things to consider, and that we should all consider, right? There's probably many people in this room who believe in Buy American standards and believe in supporting local Main Street small businesses, local workers. And so that's one of those standards that helps ensure that it is the people locally who benefit, who have their kids in the Foley school, who have their kids in the Sauk Rapids Rice School, and they have their, and so that's one of the things that that is how we've gotten to the place that we are at today. That kind of paints a little bit bigger of a picture on that topic. I know it's not easy. It means oftentimes, sure, if a project is then only is 2/3 the cost of what it would be with prevailing wage, sure, that might benefit. That might benefit the local property taxpayers in that one circumstance. Then you have to just consider the breadth of the other topics.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yep. Pam, I've been surprised.
I have one minor thing. This bill to stop the ban, or put a ban on new keys.
Yes. Oh my gosh. That's a big topic. We anticipate that being something that we hope to address and fix that. And now I'm trying to remember which particular, it's because of lead, right? Yeah, lead and cadmium. Is this a big topic for you too? For the cars. So, in their infinite wisdom, the left passed this law that basically says that you can't have lead in a whole host of consumer products, but especially into keys. And keys are one of in keys, the lead is what helps get it to, is it harden or? And essentially, what the political left is saying is keys are too dangerous for kids, and if kids are found chewing or licking on a key, that kid could end up having cancer, and so therefore we need to ban lead in keys. That's what it amounts to. So we hope to be able to achieve common sense on that and to be able to just get ourselves back to a place where we can have keys in Minnesota. And it's a host of other things.
It's hard to think of it as common sense when we're giving healthcare to illegal.
Passed all by the same people.
It's
just for the you're all here on a Saturday morning, all being involved politically. Consider for you, your families, consider how closely divided our state is and how with one election cycle we can go so far into one direction. And we have, unfortunately been the ones damaged by the political left having had 2 years of full control of state government. But that's why people voting matters. It's that close, it's that tenuous in Minnesota, and despite the fact that the Democrats did not have large majorities for those 2 years, they pursued the most progressive or the most liberal agenda that you could find anywhere in the country at that time, right? And all of these things, at the time, what were we talking about? We were talking about tampons in boys' bathrooms, we were talking about, litter boxes and other things. And at the same time, what were the things that were down the mountain from there? it was no more keys, right? I mean, it was stuff like that, right? So these are the big topics that when you vote, it determines the direction that our state will go.
Well, I'll just throw this out there and everybody agree with it, but if the Democrats had any morals, you would have a majority because there's two people that don't belong there. And they should have resigned and been gone already.
Which two are we talking about?
I'm talking about the two criminals that are in
The one from up in Detroit Lakes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And then what's the other one?
I know it. One is named Martin, and the other one is the one from Detroit Lakes.
The one.
The one that broke in up there.
She's from Woodbury, that's right.
Oh, Bobby Joe Champion.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, there have been big ethical concerns going on. Yes.
Isn't there something about the ethics committee, though, that they're trying to reestablish who's on the ethics committee, so it's not a bipartisan situation all the time? Because isn't there something about that?
Yeah, the House, so for a frame of reference, so the ethics committee that exists in both the House and the Senate, we each have our own ethics committees. And those ethics committees are traditionally made up of the same number of members on both sides of the aisle. And then whenever there's a case that comes before that ethics committee, then there's a hearing. And then in order for anything to happen from those ethics committees, someone
From
one party has to go to the other party. And so you really, especially in these last couple of years, you haven't seen that, right? Democrats have been unwilling to hold their own members accountable, whether it was the situation of the burglar in Detroit Lakes, or whether it's in the instance of Senator Bobby Joe Champion, who's the president of the Senate and sat on the ethics committee, having procured money directly for one of his legal clients. Yeah. I'm glad that you guys are aware of that. I'm impressed. Oh, that's good. That's good. Excellent. Any further questions? Otherwise, we're probably reaching, oh yeah, we are at time. So I'm grateful for you all joining us here this morning. I'm not perfect, and I don't know every last detail about every bill that's moving through. I seek to represent your interests as best I can in St. Paul, and I seek to be as accessible as possible to you. So I know we don't agree on everything, and at the same time, it's important to hear your voices and hear your priorities, so that I can best represent your interests. So I look forward to finishing out this session, and I do anticipate doing a wrap-up town hall of some sorts once session has concluded. I've had a little bit of time to let the steam leave my head, because I'm sure it'll get a little bit feisty. So again, the big dates are May 19th is when session is supposed to end, and then if it doesn't end by that point in time, or if we have to go into extra innings, as they say, the state budget has to be passed by July 1st. Otherwise, there will be a government shutdown. So, but Republicans will throw down on this illegal immigrant health care issue. So. All right, very good. Have a great rest of your Saturday. Thank you.